MLB.com's Mark Feinsand reports that the Giants have an offer on the table for Corbin Burnes, but may be getting impatient with the lack of a resolution. Is it time to move on or stay the course?
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide episodes actually 3 days a week for now, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, been hosting this show since prior to the 2019 season, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, so check us out there if you have not already. And please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And coming up on today's show, we are going to get into finally some news about Corbin Burnes. And as you would expect, it very much involves the Giants because they are not only a logical fit for Corbin Burnes, who is the best remaining free agent. Well, I guess you could make a case for someone like Alex Bregman, but definitely the best remaining pitcher by a mile and one of the best pitchers in baseball. And he's from California. The Giants are reportedly interested. We had Willy Adames and Logan Webb both like hinting, almost like giddy, and saying that they talked to Corbin Burnes and they know what he wants, and that he basically implying that he wants to play here and that the Giants want him. And so, anxiously await, the question is, okay, then why hasn't something gotten done? And of course, the answer is the offers that Burnes the offers have not been what Corbin Burnes or his agent, Scott Boras, want to accept yet. And so this, according to MLB.com's Mark Feinsand, he says, as for Burnes, who entered the offseason as the best free agent starting pitcher, the Giants and Blue Jays have been considered his two most likely landing spots. San Francisco has had an offer on the table, but sources have indicated that the Giants may be getting impatient, prompting them to consider other ways to improve the club via free agency. He says even after extending Matt Chapman and signing Willy Adames, the Giants could look to add another bat with Pete Alonso, Anthony Santander, Jurickson Profar, and Teoscar Hernandez among the potential options. According to sources, I'm continuing to read here. According to sources, Burnes is seeking a deal worth at least $245 million, which would match the 7-year, $245 million deal Steven Strasburg signed in December 2019 as the third highest guaranteed contract in history for a starting pitcher. So I'm going to pause there and mention, by the way, that deferrals in that Steven Strasburg contract, I think, made it worth more like $219 million in present day value. And I'll also point out that contract turned out to be an utter disaster for the Nationals. And they let Bryce Harper walk and re-signed Steven Strasburg, and that did not work out well for them. And so there's like a little bit of a cautionary tale mixed in there. But after Max Fried got $218 million, and the baseball world kind of unanimously expected Corbin Burnes to get a bigger guarantee than Max Fried, then it's not at all unreasonable for me to think I'm not at all surprised that Corbin Burnes or Scott Boras would be seeking at least $245 million. I mean, that we've kind of estimated on this show what I think the final contract would be, and somewhere in that neighborhood sounds about right, in the $250 million range, because I said people expected Corbin Burnes to get about $50 million more than Max Fried. Not necessarily a full 50, but in that ballpark. And so, 245 minus 218 is just a difference of $27 million more in total guaranteed money. So anyway, let's just say it was $245 million, and let's just say it was over 8 years, like Max Fried's $218 million deal. That would be $30.625 million per year. So that's hefty when you're talking about paying a pitcher into his age 37 season if it was an 8-year deal. And I mean, of course, inflation, by the end of that deal, it would be smaller than than it looks in present day value in terms of 30 million. But yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised that they want that. What's noteworthy here, though, is that Feinsand says the Giants, he says San Francisco has had an offer on the table, but sources have indicated that the Giants may be getting impatient, prompting them to consider other ways to improve the club via free agency. And so there's the question of, is this just gamesmanship? Are the Giants, I don't want to say like leaking rumors to the press, although that does happen. They very well could be getting impatient if they do in fact have an offer on the table and they think it's a strong and fair offer, which would likely be north of $200 million, maybe not quite 245. I don't know, maybe 220. And maybe they're just holding firm and saying, look, Max Fried got overpaid, and that doesn't mean we're going to overpay as well. And 220 over like 8 years is a good deal and still exceeds what people thought Burnes would get, or at least is in more the ballpark of what people thought he would get. But paying a pitcher that much, over $30 million a year, when they're already 30 in year one, it is definitely a risky business. But Corbin Burnes, one thing I keep pointing out about him is that he doesn't have a ton of mileage on his arm. He is 30 years old. He'll be 30 all year, which is nice. So he is a little younger even than Max Fried, but he only has 903 career innings, and he's been really durable. When I look at a pitcher like Max Fried, who signed with the Yankees for that $218 million that I keep mentioning, Max Fried, for example, has thrown, only 884 innings. So, but that has to do with injuries too. I want to look at someone like Madison Bumgarner, who had, at the time of reaching free agency, thrown almost 2,000 innings, 1,846. And that is scarier to me because I think pitchers break down based on innings. You only have so many throws in you. And so when you've been durable and you've only thrown like 900 career major league innings, it does give me a little bit more optimism than someone like Bumgarner, who I was very concerned that he wouldn't age well. The signs were kind of pointing in the wrong direction. And sure enough, it was like a disastrous time in Arizona, and the Diamondbacks cut him loose before that contract even finished. So anyway, the question kind of becomes, do they pivot? Like, do they say, because some have argued that the Giants lost out on the opportunity to upgrade at first base because there were a flurry of moves at first base, and basically all the best first basemen went off the board in rapid succession, and you don't really have any remaining who I think would be worth signing even. There's Josh Bell, but it doesn't really do it for me. I think a trade for like a Yandy Diaz would be a lot more attractive than signing Josh Bell. And in fact, Yandy Diaz coming to mind to, just in general, even if you got Corbin Burnes, that's a move that they still have to address first base / DH. Like, even if you have Wade and Flores, you still need to worry about the DH position. So anyway, is it time to pivot to those offensive names that were mentioned, or is this just all kind of theatrics, and ultimately, do I think Burnes will still end up in San Francisco? We'll get into it in just a minute, and before we do, today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you in part by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a dub. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score. It's thrilling. And with this $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins, I'm just looking for the most lopsided odds I can find, placing that $5 bet, hopefully coming through and claiming my $250 in bonus bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, here we go. We're going to get into my opinion on whether or not the Giants should, in fact, move on, because I just mentioned the first base market, and some have argued that perhaps the Giants, in waiting on Corbin Burnes, missed out on some players they could have signed. If they knew they weren't going to get Corbin Burnes, they could reallocate that money elsewhere, and part of it could have been like first base. And I don't know exactly which of the first basemen you're thinking. If you're thinking they should have done this, Paul Goldschmidt or Christian Walker. There have been, and then a trade for Josh Naylor. I actually like that move quite a bit for Arizona, which is annoying because, they're in the division and you got to play them and you got to compete with them for playoff spots. Anyway, thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. We do have another episode coming up this week, so it's either going to be a double dip on Friday or a Saturday episode of Locked On Giants. The Christmas holiday kind of threw off the schedule here, but look for that coming up, hopefully with news. I do think once Christmas passes, there is some more activity, then things slow down a little bit for New Year's, and then once that's over with, then things do really get going. And then you start looking at the calendar, right? And spring training gets to be in sight, and then we've seen and heard that the Giants ownership has no interest in signing a pitcher late in the process like Blake Snell, because their return on investment, while Snell was really good in the second half, he was not good in the first half, and they really could have used him, and they weren't happy about that. But it's kind of their own fault for waiting. They probably wouldn't have got him at all on the terms that they got him for, but hey, you'd probably like to have him on a long-term deal at this point. The Dodgers certainly are happy to have him on a long-term deal, so maybe you should have just done that last offseason. Cough, cough. So anyway, do I think it's time to pivot? Like, did they miss out on all these guys? And are they going to miss out on more guys if they don't pivot now? It's a very valid question, actually, because if all of a sudden Pete Alonso, Anthony Santander, Jurickson Profar, Teoscar Hernandez sign, and then Corbin Burnes, you end up, the Blue Jays end up just saying YOLO and giving him $280 million, and you don't get him, then you may be left with nowhere to pivot. However, I still think that the Giants get this done. I think that the Giants find a way to get this done. And the reason I think so is because I think that the Giants want him. I think that he wants to play for the Giants. That's why. And Canada and Toronto is a very different place than San Francisco and being close to family. He's from Bakersfield, went to St. Mary's College, and also, I believe, owns a home in Arizona. And so spring training location matters. And the Blue Jays have their spring training in Florida. And so it makes a big difference, I think, to players when you can sign with a team that has spring training in the same state or even city. I don't know exactly where he lives, but that would make a huge difference to me if the money's close and it's California and I'm from California and I have a home in Arizona and that team I'm going to potentially sign for plays spring training in Arizona versus I've got to go rent a house in Florida for a month, be away from my family, or move my family to Florida for a month. No, you'd much rather it. Like, this comes up a lot, that it matters to players. And also playing in Canada is complicated. You gotta, I don't know. It's just, it's more simple to stick with the United States. So I just think ultimately, there's been a lot of indications that he wants to play for the Giants and that the Giants want him. And so I think they do get it done. It is a little bit unnerving that they haven't been able to get something done yet. This report actually gives me belief that something may happen somewhat soon when you start hearing stuff like this. I don't know exactly what sources indicated that the Giants may be getting impatient. It could be just a legitimate fact that they're getting impatient. Maybe other agents are indicating that the Giants are more involved on these hitters than they had been previously because they're doing their due diligence on pivoting. And it could be that the Giants know or are even just telling Scott Boras and Corbin Burnes, like, look, we really like you and we want you, but we can't just sit around and wait. We've got this offer on the table that we think is fair. And if you think you can do better, we have to move on. And so I would expect that this doesn't just drag out forever, honestly. And so I wouldn't be shocked if we did have, Jeff Passan said he expected Corbin Burnes not to sign until after Christmas, and it turns out he was correct. And it's after Christmas. So at this point, I wouldn't be shocked if any moment Corbin Burnes were to sign. I think that the significant favorites are the San Francisco Giants, but you do have to worry about the rest of your roster and what happens. You do have to have a backup plan if Burnes is not coming to you. And so, I don't know, none of those a couple of those free agents that Feinsand mentions are appealing to me. Pete Alonso is interesting. Like, if his market kind of collapses, which it may, then perhaps there's something there. I do think ultimately he ends up back with the Mets. But we've discussed at length Anthony Santander. I think Teoscar Hernandez is another interesting option. Santander, I came to think, was a better fit. Switch hitter. Giants could really use a left-handed bat, and Santander would be a left-handed bat when there was a righty on the mound. And also his defense has graded out significantly better than Teoscar Hernandez's. The problem is both of these players and Pete Alonso have qualifying offers attached to them. And are they good enough players to warrant giving up what would be their third and sixth highest picks and another $500,000 in the international pool for signing them? And that's not to mention if you then also signed Corbin Burnes. I don't see them signing 3 qualifying offer players. They already signed 1 in Willy Adames. So if you were to go out and get an Anthony Santander or a Teoscar Hernandez, then that probably would mean you're not getting Corbin Burnes. It's interesting that Feinsand didn't mention Alex Bregman because, I don't know, as much as you want to give Tyler Fitzgerald an opportunity, Alex Bregman is an intriguing fit, given that what is his market exactly and how good he is. And really good defender, just kind of all-around, well-rounded player. I know the cheating scandal and all that, but very, very good player and still out there. Like, I would say better than any of those other hitters that were mentioned by a significant margin. And the only player probably better than Alex Bregman is, in fact, Corbin Burnes. And so, and it's comparable. You might say that Alex Bregman is actually maybe a better play for that kind of money, but I think you have a much higher likelihood of landing Corbin Burnes than you do of Alex Bregman, who's got probably the opposite thing where it's more of an East Coast preference. I think he's from that part of the country. I'd have to double check. But anyway, I don't know that you pivot to these other qualifying offer free agents. I think the more I've thought about it and looked into it, like Yandy Diaz, are the Rays in a position where they're going to trade this guy? Like, the Rays are always trading players when they still have value. And Yandy Diaz only has he's only under team control through 2026. And so the Giants would probably have to give up quite a bit to get him, but he is a very good hitter, and he is a defender who is, defensive runs saved. He had never been bad until this year. It was kind of bad, and the last couple years, outs above average, has been a little below average. But to me, a competent defender, based on what I'm seeing, not a good base runner, but can really, really hit, like really, really hit. This guy would be, it's not like 40 home runs, but it's high batting average, high on base, and some power. And it all comes out to like really good, way above average offense. And so that would solve a lot of problems for you in terms of adding a middle of the order bat or someone who could lead off. And he's led off a lot, I think. And just another really good bat. And what would the Rays want? Well, it wouldn't cost a fortune given that it's only 2 years of team control. And in terms of what does Yandy Diaz make, it's not a super high salary, as the Rays are often able to do. They can't afford super high salaries, so you're never going to really find those. It's $10 million in 2025 and $12 million in 2026. It's a club option for 2026. And I don't know. I just think if it would probably cost, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what the Rays would want there, but I think the Giants have some intriguing, very intriguing pitching prospects. They've also got some hitting prospects like Marco Luciano and Luis Matos, who may be of interest to a team like the Rays. And there's other players. The Rays have other players that you would potentially want too. So that's just something to look out for moving forward. So anyway, coming up in just a minute. So my point was, I think you continue to work on other positions of need, but I don't think it's time to pivot to like giving up on Corbin Burnes and signing another qualifying offer free agent. If you're not going to sign 3, and I just think financially what it would cost to sign an Anthony Santander or a Pete Alonso on an annual basis, that would take them out of Corbin Burnes. Whereas if you make a trade for a Yandy Diaz, perhaps you send back a player, I don't know, maybe Lamont Wade Jr., but then I don't think that actually would make sense, but it's a cheaper average annual value, so you could still probably add Burnes in addition to a Yandy Diaz. But the question is, how high are they willing to go in payroll? And that's where we have some more information from Susan Slusser, who talks about why things haven't happened with Corbin Burnes and the Giants yet, and what her sources are telling her. So we'll get into that situation, which has to do with money, in just a second. And before we do, today's episode of Locked on Giants is brought to you in part by Game Time. I love going to live events during the holiday season. I've done it a bunch, and it's just a great time of year. And Game Time is focused on togetherness this holiday season. That means when you bring people together at live events, the experience is that much better, and it's the perfect gift if you're looking for a belated Christmas present. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And a couple of my favorite features as well are the panoramic views from your seat, because I go to new venues and I don't know what I'm looking at on a two-dimensional map. And so it's very helpful to get that panoramic view. And also the Game Time guarantee. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, here we go. We are going to get into this piece that was written by Susan Slusser about, what her sources are telling her regarding the Giants and Corbin Burnes. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day, or 3 days a week for now. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And as I'm saying this, I'm looking through my notes, and I had the note, but it's like disappearing on me I don't really know what to say. I know what the note said, but I don't have it verbatim, I suppose. It looks like I did lose that somehow. I was just looking at it today, so I don't know where it would have gone, but it does seem to be gone. It was basically that the issue with Corbin Burnes and why things hadn't happened yet with Corbin Burnes. Oh, there it is. Excuse me, I found it. So Susan Slusser said in the San Francisco Chronicle, quote, according to an industry source, so one person, the issue with Corbin Burnes is whether Giants ownership wants to push the payroll above $200 million again after doing so only to finish fourth in the NL West last season. Buster Posey, the franchise icon and newly installed top baseball executive, also made explicit San Francisco's interest in Japanese starter Roki Sasaki during the winter meetings, and the Giants are believed to have met last week with Sasaki and agent Joel Wolfe in Southern California. End quote. So there's actually, a little Sasaki nugget in there that the Giants were one of the teams to meet with him. I have heard, like I just saw today, Tigers president of baseball operations Scott Harris, former GM of the Giants, saying that they're waiting on hearing back from Sasaki's representatives as to whether or not they're even going to get a meeting. And so the fact that the Giants have already met with him is a sign that they're an attractive destination and probably more likely than Detroit, at least, to get a meeting. But so it kind of ties into that. Do you wait on Roki Sasaki? He's not going to sign until the international bonus or the international signing period changes to next year's on January 15th. And so I don't know if that's what's happening here. Maybe Scott Boras wants to wait on Sasaki to sign so that the teams that don't get him, maybe notably the Giants, if they don't get him, then that puts more of a fire on them to go after Corbin Burnes. Because with Sasaki, it is an entirely different ballgame in that he is just going to cost like $4 to $7 million total, not per year, just one time. And then it's a rookie contract where he's got the 3 pre-arbitration years and then 3 arbitration years. And I mean, he could be a super 2 and get 4 arbitration years actually. But nevertheless, that's part of what makes Roki Sasaki a right-handed pitcher arguably the best pitcher on the market, you could even say, potentially. Very, very attractive. Every single team in baseball is going to do whatever they can to try to get him. And this was the same situation with Shohei Ohtani. The Angels didn't have to pay him anything really until he became arbitration eligible and his salaries built up. So it is noteworthy that the Giants had a meeting with Sasaki. It's also worth pointing out that people in the industry have long believed that it's inevitable he goes to the Dodgers. But then his agent said that's just not true, and there's really no reason to lie about that. And because he's not going to get a huge contract, he just basically gets to pick a team. So why do the whole song and dance if you've already made your decision? But I wouldn't be shocked. I do think he ends up on the Dodgers. Another team that people believe he might go to is the Padres. So that's fun. Of course, the NL West, of course. But maybe it's the Giants. Maybe things finally change and he chooses the Giants. I have no idea. But there's no reason you couldn't sign Corbin Burnes and try to get Roki Sasaki, because that's not going to impact your finances significantly at all. Sasaki's he doesn't even count. It's just like you just almost get him for free. But the other point here is that according to an industry source from Susan Slusser, the issue as to why Corbin Burnes hasn't signed yet with the Giants is whether Giants ownership wants to push the payroll above $200 million again after doing so only to finish fourth in the NL West last season. So I don't know that I buy this really either. I believe Susan Slusser, and I don't know, it obviously matters who her source is, and I think she's a very good reporter who wouldn't say something like this unless it was on very good authority. But you're not going out and signing Willy Adames and just calling it a day, I don't think. And the fact that we now have a report from Mark Feinsand saying the Giants have an offer on the table, they're not totally lowballing Corbin Burnes. There's just no way that they would do that, because they know what it takes to get into the door, and they're not just going to be like, oh, here's 2 years, $40 million. Of course not. And also the way they structured Willy Adames' contract is that he's only making $22 million this year and next year, and then I forget exactly what it comes out to for the final 5 years of the deal, but it's lower for these 2 years. And so their current projected payroll in terms of cash output on players is roughly $176 million. So yeah, if you added a $30 million a year player, you are back at over $200 million. So that would be a concern if that was your concern. But that would be very frustrating. I mean, there's no but. If that is in fact what the issue is, as Slusser said, and this, by the way, was days ago. I think it was before Christmas or Christmas Eve or the day. I forget exactly when she wrote this. But the Feinsand piece, the one that I read earlier about the Giants having an offer on the table and maybe getting impatient, that is contradicting what Slusser is saying to an extent. To a significant extent, you might even say. So I don't know whose source has the better information. They both could be right, but it could be misleading. I don't know where the Giants are at, but I don't think they're in a position to just... Buster Posey made it sound, Willy Adames made it sound, Logan Webb made it sound like they are intending to make significant upgrades. They're not just going to be like, let's just leave it at that. Although Alex Pavlovich wrote that Buster Posey had convinced ownership to kind of change its plan, and that they were planning to kind of just let the youth develop in 2025. So it's really unclear, but I continue to think the Giants are the favorites for Corbin Burnes, not the favorites for Roki Sasaki, but in the conversation certainly. And it remains to be seen about the hitters and trade market and all kinds of stuff. So much more to get into. all throughout the offseason. Locked On Giants will be here for you. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter or X at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thanks in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again one more time this week, or more if something goes down. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.